My name is Martin Haven. Alongside me once more, I'm delighted to welcome David Leslie. And David, a very different look to the grid, not in terms of positions, but in terms of the weather from what we've seen the last couple of days.
Yes, it's quite a big difference. We've changed from having constant downpours all weekend long since we arrived here. Now all of a sudden the sun is trying to shine through. There's a bit of blue sky to one side of the circuit, a few clouds to the other, but it's very dry out there. Everybody's got their slick tyres on for the first time, and most of the engineers are scratching their heads wondering what to do with the cars, having done no dry running whatsoever so far this weekend. They've got no idea what settings to put on their cars, and they're about to start a 3-hour race.
Well, the man who starts on pole position, Christophe Bouchou in the Labre competition car, his third Super Pole win in 3 races, and that car, which won last time out, is starting from the front. Let's hear from him now.
Christophe, congratulations, you're on pole position. You're also championship leader, and you were racing at home. Does that put any more pressure on you?
Yeah, of course, we are in France, and we want to give our best that we can. But that changed not a lot, you know. Just the one question, it's about our setup, because we have never tested before on the dry condition. So I hope our setup will be good for dry.
Well, the key there from Christophe Bouchou, the Labre team learning this car all the time. They've never raced here in the dry. The Hazemans team have. They raced their Car Sport Holland Vipers here last year. The Lister team as well, who must be seen as their main rivals, also raced here last year. It was hot and dry at the finale, where Car Sport Holland and Lister went head-to-head for the championship last year. So, David, perhaps the Labre team, who were very good indeed in the wet and had a chance to develop the car for that, at Brno certainly, maybe a little bit on the back foot here, even though they're starting from the front row.
Yeah, they've got to learn very fast. They know their own cars, their Porsche cars have raced for years, but this Viper is new to them this year, so they've really got to get the hang of it, and they've not been able to do that, not in the dry at least. In the wet, certainly, they've had lots of wet running so far this year, but they're really going to have to struggle with it. They've got a very good wet setup. We've seen that, as you said, from the qualifying, etc. But all of a sudden now they've got to go out there and start this race in the dry. And certainly the little bit of dry run they've done, testing, etc., they've got an idea of what they want to do. But talking to some of the teams, they're a little bit wary. They're not sure whether to go for the very soft tyre or the harder tyre to start the race, and then maybe change halfway through once they find out what the wear rate is like. So we think we might see a couple of cars coming in early on, because they've taken that risk of going for the soft tyres on the front for the start of the race to see what grip we can get and try and get good times. They might have to come in a little bit early, change some tyres to put the harder stuff on for later in the race. We'll have to wait and see how it pans out at the moment.
Well, for Jamie Campbell-Walter and his Lister teammate Julian Bailey, dry conditions are a very good thing indeed. The Lister really doesn't like the rain very much. You can't soften it up in the way that you can do with the Vipers, their main rivals, and they really struggled in Brno, particularly in the very wet mid-session. Well, the interesting story behind the 3 Belmondo Vipers, David, is that we hear quite an amazing revelation that they don't have access to any intermediate tyres, only slicks or full wet weather tyres. Now, I said at the top of the show that this track does get very greasy very fast the moment we get a sprinkling of rain, but perhaps a little bit of a surprise that there's nothing in between full wet and full dry tyres.
That is a surprise. Dunlop are their preferred tyre, and I know Dunlop do a lot of work with the Belmondo team. It's their #1 team basically, and for them not to have intermediate tyres, either they've used them all up already, what they brought here, maybe not expecting it to be quite as wet or quite such changing conditions as it has been over the weekend, but to start a race with one of the 3 sets of tyres, types of tyres you would expect to be able to use, not available, will be a big setback should there be a sprinkling of rain during the afternoon.
Luca Riccitelli on pole position in the NGT class. At one stage it looked as though Superpole might be all about the NGT cars, but it just about dried enough in the end, for the GT cars to go quicker. Christian Pescatori starts behind him in the Ferrari, and the Ferrari looked very, very competitive at Brno. Now, Magny-Cours not as low a downforce track as Monza, but certainly not as tight and twisty and slow as Brno is in relative terms. But again, the Ferrari, I think, might have a chance in the NGT class against the Porsches. This, of course, is on board with the other Ferrari. This is the #5 car, and another little story here. Mimo Schiattarella didn't do a single lap in practice. and it was all done by Emanuele Naspetti, and as a result, Schiattarella had to do his 3 qualifying laps, or laps to get himself qualified, in the warm-up this morning. That's kind of leaving it to the last minute as well.
It is, without doubt, but sometimes they have problems. They certainly had a problem yesterday in qualifying, which meant they didn't get as many laps in as they wanted, and therefore they were out of sync with what they wanted to do. They went to the stewards of the meeting and said, excuse me, we have this problem, can you help us? And they agreed quite happily to let them do his 3 laps, and it had to be a full 3 timed laps in practice warm-up this morning. So they're now qualified and they're out there.
Well, you can see the top dozen cars, half a dozen of them are GT cars, half are the NGT cars. And one of the faster of the NGT cars you see starting at the back there, that's Thomas Enger and Justin Wilson's car. And in fact, that had a ride height infringement, I believe, after Superpole, and they were dropped to the back of that group. But they start ahead of the second Carsport Holland car and the Belmondo Vipers 11 and 10. The number 10 car of Anthony Kumpen and the number 12 car both having engine changes overnight after problems in practice. More Vipers, the Racing Box and GLPK cars before we get into the rest of the NGT field. The Steve O'Rourke, Tim Sugden, Emka car in the next row down, row 10 there. The NGT cars who didn't make it into the Superpole. Further back, Nigel Smith, the Great Britain, racing there with Yuka Hirahane in the Freisinger Motorsport car. And it's a very busy championship indeed this. The entry list is sealed because they had so many entries at the beginning of the season trying to get in. Right at the back there, row 15, the number 6 Ferrari. They had problems with that car in qualifying, Gunther Blielinger and Marc Duez, but they were very fast indeed in warm-up, and they and Stefan Ortelli in the back should go well. Cars coming around to the start of the first lap at Magny-Cours in dry conditions, but the team's taking no chances with the weather. The forecast has it that it will rain, and probably heavily midway through the afternoon. And although we woke to bright blue skies this morning, look in the background, it's very dark indeed as the Labre Competition Viper leads them around. It's a rolling start, and oh, tapped out at the back. That's the number 51 car. That's another of the Labre Competition cars. So Jürgen von Gartzen knocked sideways out of the final hairpin before they even get to the start line. So von Gartzen right at the back, and he will restart behind everybody else. But it's the Vipers out front, the Listers 3rd and 5th position, the Ferrari in between the Listers, and both the Listers for the first time this year starting in the top half dozen. In fact, both of them getting into Superpole and actually having a run for the first time all year. And the Carsport Holland car in 2nd place, started by Mike Hazemans as Jamie Campbell-Walter goes around the outside of the Ferrari. That is Emanuele Naspetti in the number 5 car, but look at this, a challenge for the lead already. Hazemans determined to get on with this. They had dreadful fuel problems last year in the final race of the championship when he was sharing with Tom Coronel. They had a fantastic car, very quick indeed, but it just guzzled fuel, and as a result they lost the race and the championship to Lister. And I think perhaps a chance here for some revenge for the Dutch driver. Well, he leads now with Christophe Bouchou in 2nd place, the pole sitter, and behind the 2 Listers. And as Bouchou said from the grid, the chance to get the cars set up for newcomers to the track like the Labre Competition team, very difficult indeed. There is the Harbour Racing car. The number 60 machine will be shared by Laurent Cazeneuve, Sylvain Noël, the 2 Frenchmen, recovering from a spin. Well, very early stop indeed. This is indicative of a problem for Michael and Sebastian Bleekemolen's car, coming out through the pits. But out front, the Listers running strongly. Now, the question that Jamie Campbell-Walter was musing just before the race, when he was lining up a row behind his teammate Julian Bailey on the grid in the other Lister, was how long it would be before he had to try and start overtaking Julian, and how long it would be before Julian let him go.
I think it's one of those things that Julian is not going to let him go. And Julian will try and stay there in 3rd place, although having said that, he'll try and work his way up towards the front. So the 2 Listers, I don't think are going to battle each other to the point where they're going to start knocking each other off or running into each other. But certainly the 2 of them will try and work together to work their way through to the front of this grid. At the moment they're lying there, you can see them 3rd and 4th, nose to tail going around there. And once they settle down, they do like the drive very much more than the wet, and they'll work their way forward to the front, I'm sure.
Change further back, we're just seeing it now on the screen. Caught a glimpse of it a moment or two ago as we ride with Emanuele Naspetti. There is the best placed Belmondo Viper ahead of him. And the Belmondo cars, well, they've been a little bit at 6s and 7s this weekend. Very good in the wet, dreadful in the warm-up this morning, and those 2 overnight engine changes. So, again, they will certainly be hoping that it rains, and rains soon, because that's their best chance against the Listers. Now, Spetti, of course, only the 3rd race for this Raffinelli car. And incidentally, to answer one of the emails we had when we were doing the race from Bruno, these are not the first racing cars from last year. The first racing entries, one of them, I believe, is being run by France and Nico Vieth as the 28 Ferrari. But these are the 3rd and 4th Ferraris built as race cars. And they were actually built from full road cars. Gabriele Raffinelli was explaining that essentially you buy a 550 Maranello and then you send almost all of it back to Ferrari for a bit of a discount and try and get some change back. The seats, the carpets, the wheels, a lot of the body in actual fact goes back as well, because it's not used in these cars. Only really the very basic central area of the car is used, and the outer panels and the aerodynamics, the engines, the gearbox and so on are all very, very much purpose-built racing material. Now on board with the NGT leader, and this is the Riccatelli Red Bull Porsche. Now don't forget, they had a dreadful time at Monza, right back on full strength now, and the cars that were the class of the field at the beginning of last year, once more the class of the field here. Riccatelli sharing with Dieter Quester and David, 2 very experienced Porsche drivers indeed in that car.
Yes, they've been around a long time, they know the car extremely well, they've driven Porsches for many years. And they really have got this car very well sorted. It's been good all weekend here. It was top of the pile in one of the really wet sessions on, I think it was on Sunday. And, you know, they've been able to get the best out of that car when it was wet, and I'm sure they'll be able to do the same in the dry. They know the car well. They've got all the settings from the different circuits. They were here last year. So I'm pretty sure that they're out in the lead there, and they'll want to keep that lead throughout the whole of this race.
Well, they've got a lot of pressure from behind from the 50 Chirot car, the Labre competition Porsche. But of course, they were the NGT champions last year. That's been driven at the moment by young French single-seater ace Sébastien Dumez, and he's doing a very good job indeed. Out front, though, look at this. The Carsport Holland machine starting to drive away from the Labre car, and you wonder just how spot-on or otherwise Labre's dry weather setup is. The Listers, it seems to me, David, are getting closer to the second-placed Viper.
They certainly are. They can see they're pulling in there, and they're still nose to tail. They're following each other. Jamie Campbell-Walter following Julian Bailey in 3rd place. And I think they will just slowly, you know, wind their cars up and get closer and closer. I'm pretty sure they'll be able to catch and pass them. But they know they've got 3 hours in this race, or 117 laps, to try and get to the front. And there's no point in doing it in the first sort of 10 minutes, because you're just going to make a mistake and fall off somewhere. So they'll work at it stage by stage and catch up. The 2 cars in front, the 2 Vipers, we know are not very sure about their tyre choice, whether they've got it right. This one we're watching now, the red and white one, the Chirot car, they're not sure about the setup. And the Hazelman car, we know that they're a bit dubious about their front tyres, what they've done to it and whether it will last. So obviously in the very beginning here, if they've gone for what they said they were going to go, the softer front tyres, they're making the best use of it right at the very beginning of the race and really putting in some very quick times. They've actually got the quickest time set on lap 3, but that can only be bad on a longer time, so we'll have to wait and see how long those tyres last, if they can go the full or nearly 1 hour before they come in for the fuel, or if they have to come in early.
Well, on board with the Ferrari, we had a quick shot there inside the Carsport Holland garage. Of course, yesterday was Holland's national holiday. It was the Queen's, Queen Beatrice of the Netherlands' official birthday. And the team, like everybody else here, enjoying that with a thorough soaking. But wet weather tyres, it seems, not the call at the moment. Everybody's going to be prepared, though, with pretty much every kind of rubber there is. Hazelman's leads then by 1.9 from Bouchou. Bailey and Campbell-Walton, nothing between them. Boris de Richebourg still 5th place in that Belmondo car. And that is the best of their cars at the moment, with the Ferrari in 6th position. And we were on board there with Jean-Pierre Jarier, who shares the number 9 car with Francois Lafont. They are the reigning French GT champions. They made a number of forays into the championship last year in the FIA series. And one of the races was here at the end of the season. They, like Wolfgang Kaufmann and a couple of others, Christophe Bouchou, among others, were racing in the French GT Championship pair of races here on, I'm going to say Friday, but actually I mean Sunday, because that was the free practice day here. It's Tuesday now, and we're still treating it like it's Sunday because it's race day. So I'm going to get home tomorrow on Wednesday and think it's Monday. It'll be a very, very bizarre week. But there they are. They're just outside the top half dozen. Jarier very quick, and obviously his Formula One heritage doesn't need too much introduction. Now further back, this is the Labre competition car. I bet you that is the recovering 51 car. Yes, it is, just picking up a place. So that was Jürgen von Gartzen working hard. And incidentally, the car he was just passing, that was Stefan Ortelli, whose Porsche also started right at the back. In fact, he was stone last on the grid. So Haseman still trying to get what he can out of this car while the getting is good. Reminder that we will be rejoining our race action live at 2:05 Central European. That's at 13:05 British Eurosport time. These highlights from the early part of the race, and Julian Bailey sitting right behind, Jamie Campbell-Walter rather, sitting right behind Julian Bailey. But those four cars, the class of the field, they're really driving away from the Belmondo Viper and from the Ferrari. Now here are the other Belmondo Vipers, the 10 and 11 cars. Anthony Kumpen in car number 10, slowing. He's on the right-hand side there, and the 11 car is catching him and catching him fast. And it looks like he's been reeled in by the second car, Sport Holland car as well. So it looks as though Anthony Kumpen in car number 10 with that brand new engine overnight, don't forget, may have a little bit of a problem on his hands. Well, the number 10 car of Anthony Kumpen slowing now. Inside him will go Michael Bleekemolen. 3 Bleekemolens racing in the 2 car Sport Holland cars, of course. Michael Bleekemolen and his 2 sons, Sebastian, the older, and Jeroen, the younger. And now, look at this, Jean-Pierre Jarier is getting in on the act as well. This 3-way Franco-Belgian, it's a Franco-Dutch-Belgian fight, in fact, because they're all having a very good set to, but it looks definitely, David, as though Kumpen's got a problem. And is that very early to be a tyre problem, do you think, or could it be something as simple as that?
I think it's very early to be a tyre problem. I don't think it's that at all. But certainly everyone seems to be driving past him at the moment. We've just seen the car Sport car, now the Jarier car, the darker coloured car there, number 9 going past.
Well, there is Jeroen Bleekemolen. There is, yeah, the Bleekemolen car comfortably running away. Not Jeroen, it's Michael who's driving that one. It's Jeroen who is the co-driver. In fact, no, there we go, the 3 car. That is the. See, now I've already got my Bleekemolens confused, and we're only 5 minutes in, because it's Sebastian who shares this car with Mike Haseman's the man who's starting it. And the car Sport Holland cars in Monza with dreadful trouble, of course, because they have made a large number of changes to their cars. And that resulted in Monza in 3 engine blow-ups for the 2 cars, because they quite simply had underestimated the distance or the problems that would be caused by moving the oil tank towards the back of the car. And if you wonder why they do that, well, it's for better weight balance, to try and move as much weight as possible further back into the car with that huge, great V10 lump of cast iron hanging out the front. David, anything you can move back has got to be a real benefit.
It is. It's a very big engine, a very heavy engine out the front. But I mean, these cars have been racing now for quite some time. They're fairly well sorted. But when they're fairly well sorted, everybody's got a car very, very equal. And they just wanted, the car sport team wanted a car that was a little bit better. And they set about during the winter to try and make that a little bit better. They've done various little changes to the suspension, to the bodywork, diffuser at the rear, and one of them was that oil tank change. Unfortunately, that was one of them that didn't work, and cost them something in the region of £75,000 for engine rebuilds at the first race at Monza. So now they've put that back to standard, where the oil tank's at the front, and they've been going extremely well since. So the car is very, very fast, but we do know that we're watching it very carefully to find out if it's going to come in early to change those front tyres that they weren't too sure about, or whether they'll be able to stretch all the way towards the end of the first hour and come in along with everybody else when they come in for the normal fuel stop.
Riding on board the number 62 Ferrari with David Terrian and Christian Pescatori. This is Pescatori who started the car. David Terrian, the Frenchman, will take it over pretty much at the midway point. The weather hopefully not being too much of a factor. We're kind of expecting that the NGT cars should stop just the once. The GT cars are imagining that they will make 2 stops. The Lister team reckon they'll go 58 minutes on a tank of fuel. They reckon that most others, if they're going to have any chance, will need to do at least 55 minutes, and then maybe just kind of save it towards the end if you can. The maximum race distance is 3 hours, maximum number of laps 117, so it looks as though we'll get to the 3 hours first. Probably only do a little under 110 laps. Now that, I think, is the result of the problems for the number 10 car. We will try and have a look and see why the car is in the pits. Simon Walser is down there with the microphone, and there is Kumpen's car being pulled back in. So whatever it was not a drive-aroundable problem. Anthony Kumpen's car in the pits. We saw him bailing out, and the team now pulling it back into the garage. So could that be a legacy potentially of their overnight engine change? Maybe something didn't quite go back together the way that they wanted it to. Well, problems for one of the Belmondo cars then already. We are now seeing the Carsport Holland car continue to drive away from the opposition. It's out front, and Mike Hazelman's being very disappointed not to win the championship at Magny-Cours last year. Would certainly hope to be doing rather better here this year. And he's still keeping the rest of them at bay, starting to work his way into the slower NGT traffic. But look at Julian Bailey now, right behind Christophe Bouchou. Jamie Campbell-Walters dropped back for a few laps, and he's about a couple of seconds further back. There is France and Nico Vita's Ferrari, and that's done, what, half a dozen laps now, and they are looking like they're out of the race. And that car really has been troubled all the way from the beginning of the year. Julian Bailey, his Lister just about identifiable. If you look right at the bottom of the nose, you can see little day-glow flares there.
Warm-up lap, I had misfires in the engine. So the first lap, it was okay, but then the second warm-up lap, the engine was already fucked. And now it's really done. I don't know what it is. We're going to race again.
Thank you, Anthony.
So Anthony Kumpen, a misfire as they went out onto the grid, and obviously that's something that has not been able to be fixed easily. The number 10 car out of the race very early on, and Belmondo's 3-strong effort down to 2 already. In traffic now, passing the Russian-driven Freisinger Motorsport car is Christophe Bouchou. And this is where Julian Bailey will use all his experience and all his guile to try and latch onto Bouchou and find a way past. They go through the second JMB GSA Ferrari, or the JMB competition Ferrari. And Bailey just squeaked through there as well. The 63 car kept out of the way. Next up is the Harbitter Racing Porsche, the number 60 car of Laurent Cazenave and Sylvain Noël. Ooh, GLPK Viper, a big slide coming out there. It's dry, David, but it still shows that there's plenty of horsepower to spin the car if you really try hard enough.
Yeah, these cars with all that weight on the front and all that power going to the rear wheels, it's very easy to get onto the throttle just that little bit early. And you can see the consequences we watched just then. The back of the car comes round and they're having to hang on to it. At some point during this race, I'm pretty sure that somebody will not hang on to it and will fall off somewhere around the circuit.
Well, that's hopefully not something we'll see Julian Bailey doing. He would be very embarrassed indeed. Lawrence Pierce has already said to his drivers, if you crash the car, just keep walking. On board with Jean-Pierre Jarier, exiting the Lycée hairpin. This is just a lift in the dry. It was a full hard brake and changed down at least one gear for the GT cars, that first left-hander in the rain yesterday. And he is now really enjoying himself, closing in on the Viper ahead of him. This is the number 4 Carsport Holland car. This is the father and son Bleekemolen combination. So it'll be Michael Bleekemolen who is in our sights as we ride with Jumper Jarier. Down the gearbox. And further back you can see the Ferrari still coming up the order. That's Marc Duez, don't forget, started right at the back, or all but right at the back in that 550 Maranello Raffinelli car. And again, Jarier riding the curbs and really gained there through the Nürburgring chicane. Down the inside. Waited for a clang and there wasn't one, so that was a nice clean move and nicely opportunistic there as Michael Bleekemolen really just slightly missed his braking point.
Here we see it again. They've just left that gap down the inside, and Jarier took the opportunity, dived down the inside, a little bit offline. Even he went wider than he expected, but he was given the space by the Bleekemolens, and nice cleanly through, no damage to the cars. Remember, these cars have got the best part of 3 hours to do, so you don't want to be starting to damage it within the first 20 minutes or so. That way you'll never get to the end. So nice clean driving is what's required, and that was one of these really good racing manoeuvres.
And you certainly don't want to be coming into the pits at this stage either. The Art Engineering team, I think, like everybody else, just being prepared in case. But, well, hard to tell from on board with Emanuele Naspetti in the Ferrari. It all looks fairly bleached out outside because of the dark inside the cockpit. But, David, not really threatening skies yet, I don't think.
No, it isn't. It actually looks quite good outside. It's the best it's been all weekend. We keep saying this because we've just got soaked for the last 3 days here. But everyone, I'm sure, is enjoying this. They're actually out there doing racing on a circuit where they can give the cars and let them go and stretch their legs the way they should be. And we're watching some superb machinery. This 550 Ferrari out here does look and sound wonderful as it's going around. And to have the in-car camera as well just makes all that bit difference to see it going around this quite wonderful Magny-Cours circuit. Very fast circuit in places, but there's about 3 hairpins in here that slow it right down. But fairly flowing, and you can see it here changing up through the gears, using that sequential gear change stick sticking up in the middle of the car there. But using some of the curbs to cut right across, and some of them will keep off. Most of them have kept off all weekend because it's been raining, but now with it being dry, they really are using them and cutting right over them wherever at all possible.
Well, you could enjoy the sounds of the Ferrari V12 there. Don't forget, when we get to Silverstone in, I was going to say a fortnight, but in about 10 days' time now, because we're nearly in the middle of this week, there will be a new arrival in the championship, the first of the ProDrive built Ferrari 550 Maranellos. Now, that's already been out testing. In fact, the Carsport Holland crew were testing at the A1 ring in Austria last week. The ProDrive car was there, and they said 2 things. First of all, it's 10 kilometers an hour quicker in a straight line than the Carsport Holland Viper, which is a good thing, undoubtedly, for the ProDrive car, even if its lap times weren't quite on the pace of the Carsport car. But Michael Bleekemolen saying that apparently the thing sounds, when you're standing in the pits, as if there's an F1 car driving around. Now, that's not actually the case with the cars we've seen racing so far. Raffinelli's cars make a glorious noise, but you wouldn't mistake it for a Formula 1 car. I wonder whether the ProDrive cars need still to do a little bit of sound baffling before they actually get onto an FIA racetrack. We'll find out surely at Silverstone.
Here we are on the Riccatelli car. They're leading this class at the moment. They're, as we said earlier, they've really got their act together. They know this car very well indeed, and they're 2 experienced drivers, Questo and Riccatelli, making the best of it. But they're not having it all their own way. They are being chased quite hard at the moment, and it certainly looks, when we were watching him, he's pushing very hard with that car. He's not giving it any quarter whatsoever. He's really trying. He's not taking it easy. He knows that he will have to drive like this for the whole length of the race if he expects to win this, the NGT class of this race.
Well, again, we just saw the Chiro car of Sébastien Dumais, and that is the gap between first and second in NGT. Riccatelli, very experienced in this kind of machinery. Dumais, much less so. He's a single-seater man, essentially, or has been in his young career so far. But both of them familiar with Magny-Cours, and that's something that has been a benefit, certainly in the rain in practice. Drivers who have never been here before have really suffered, whereas drivers who have been experienced here, and Eric Cairol in the super production BMW is certainly one of those, have fared very well indeed. Now the 62 Ferrari picks up a position there. Christian Pescatori at the wheel of that car, and again looking for well, to try and better their second place at at Brno. There's the word I'm searching for. The Ferrari, of course, finished right behind the winning Porsche in the NGT class, and they're hoping here that it will be a different story. At the moment, though, looks as though the Porsches have got the legs of them. Here he is, though, the NGT car in the middle of two backmarker GT cars, if you like, two of the slower GT cars, and chasing the Belgian-driven Silver Racing Viper ahead of him. That's Robert Dierik and Eric de Donker's car. And further ahead, the Ferrari moving and picking its way through some of the NGT cars. So now that we're a few minutes into this race, David, big mixture of cars out there. Ooh, Tim Sugden just getting into the braking area very late there and sliding. Sugden not here on the practice day because he was racing in the British GT Championship on Saturday and Sunday at Donington Park, and then flew in for Monday and Tuesday in Magny-Cours. So a very busy man, as we see a challenge now for second place. Julian Bailey dives down the inside of the Labra Viper and takes second place away from Christophe Bouchou. Well, he had been catching him as we were watching the leaders earlier on, and while we've been back in the other classes, he has sidled right up behind Christophe Bouchou, and I wonder whether Bouchou's tyres are starting now to be a bit beyond their best.
They certainly were not sure about their dry setup. As we said earlier, this is a new car to them this year. They're used to running the Porsches, but a little bit wary about what they were doing for the dry setup, having had nothing but wet running. Maybe it's starting to take its toll. It certainly looks as though he's slowed down as the race has gone on. Maybe he's another one who's taken those softer tyres for the first stint to try and see what happens and try and get the best out of the car, starting on the front row. But the listers, they finally made it. They're through there into second place, and right behind Bouchou now, you can see there was the glimpse of the other lister. There it is in the background, just come through. A Porsche in between Bouchou's Viper and Jamie Campbell-Walter with a lister. You can see the headlights on the second lister further back there. And while it was a long way back from Julian Bailey, now it seems to be catching up again a little bit. They seem to have taken a bit of a relaxation, and that's now finished, and now they're starting to push a bit harder. So it looks as though they've settled down into the race, and now they've got into the back markers. They're trying to push forward, and already you can see Jamie Campbell-Walter now right behind Bouchou. And Jamie won't want to let Julian go at all. He'll want to be right behind him as soon as he can get there.
So 15 laps in, Mike Hasemans leads for Car Sport Holland. Julian Bailey and Jamie Campbell-Walter on the move. Look out, Christophe Bouchou, third place is not safe. So there you go, 15 laps of drama and incidents at the start of the race, and after this short break we will be back live for the closing stages of the FIA GT race from Magny-Cours. Stay with us here for the Super Racing Weekend. Welcome back to Magny-Cours for round 3 of the FIA GT Championship and Eurosport's Super Racing Weekends. Still big clouds overhead. Still the race is running dry, though, the first dry running that they have had throughout the weekend. Well, we're looking here at the change of leads. This is the number 3 Car Sport Holland machine being passed by Julian Bailey. That was lap 19. Bailey had already worked his way past Christophe Bouchou and into the lead. Paul Belmondo, we had seen him in the top 10 from the beginning of the race, but, well, the story there is all too evident. Gravel spewing out of the bottom of the car. In fact, Belmondo had planted it in the gravel traps. He'd lost 3 laps by the time he came back into the pits, and the team, fearing that they had damaged the oil coolers at the front, decided to limit what damage had been done by not sending the car back out to go and blow a very expensive V10 engine. Well, by this stage we had the listers first and second, and this is the sort of thing that does not endear you to lister boss Lawrence Pierce. Julian Bailey retaking the lead from Jamie Campbell-Walter. Campbell-Walter had run second behind Bailey for some while and then sneaked in front. And oh dear, well, they were hard at it in traffic. And the poor Sébastien Dumez in his number 50 Porsche there, stuck in the middle of it. Just after an hour, 1 hour and 2 minutes into the race, the two listers stopped nose to tail. They were the last of the lead cars to stop. The number 3 Bleekemolen car had come in fact, after 40 minutes with a problem. Tom Coronel took over the #1 car from Jamie Campbell-Walter. You can see him there at the back of the picture, talking to Lawrence Pierce, and Julian Bailey handed over to Nicolaus Springer. Now, no disrespect to Nicolaus, but it was always expected that he would be doing a slower stint than Tom Coronel, and so it turned out, dropping from 2nd down to 6th position. But just recently, while we've been on air, problems for the #3 Car Sport Holland car. Michael Bleekemolen stepping out, or Jeroen Bleekemolen rather, stepping out of the car, and he was sharing with Mike Hazemans. And again, the body language saying everything you need to know. The car had stopped after 40 minutes for its first fuel stop, came in after what seemed like a regular scheduled stop after another hour, but then you can see Ton Hazemans there saying, right, push it away. The Belmondo car, the Belmondo team were down to just 1 car, which is in 3rd place, chasing Jamie Campbell-Walter and Christophe Bouchou. But the Car Sport Holland entry that had looked so strong was out of contention. We now have 30 minutes of the race left as we pick up the pictures live. The Bouchou and Belloc car has made its 2nd stop, so too has the leader. Tom Coronel handed back to Jamie Campbell-Walter, and Vincent Vos back in the #12 car, the only Belmondo car still in the race. He's taken that car back from Boris de Richebourg, who did the middle stint. So all fueled up and all ready to go the distance. Now, we saw that the Belmondo car and the Labre competition car, which are 3rd and 2nd respectively, took a full set of tyres on their first stop. We've been on air while their 2nd stops happened, so I can't tell you about that, but we know that Lister took no tyres on their first stops, and they may well go to a stage where they were only contemplating taking left side tyres for their 2nd stop, and that may well be the case. Now, the Ferrari leading in the NGT class. In 2nd place is the #52 car, and the 77 Red Bull Motorsport car is in 3rd, but it's David Thierry of France leading in the Ferrari. So this is our race leader then, Jamie Campbell-Walter, the 2nd of the Lister Storms, as I said, came in 2nd place with Julian Bailey, dropped down to 6th spot, and now, after the changes happened, is back up into 5th place, and that's, you have to say, probably largely as a result of the loss of the #3 Car Sport Holland machine. So Jamie Campbell-Walter leads. Christophe Bouchou in 2nd place is 1 minute and 5 seconds behind. Vincent Vos a further 1 minute and 10 seconds behind Bouchou, and in fact has been lapped, the 3rd place driver, by Jamie Campbell-Walter. So David, after the early going where it was I think wait and see what happened with the leaders for the Listers, and then their little inter-Nissan rivalry, the Lister clearly seems to be the best set-up car on the racetrack, certainly given the conditions that are prevalent at the moment.
Yeah, certainly the Lister does like the dry compared to the wet, and they've got the car well sorted. They were here last year, and they know what a setting is round here last year, so they've obviously been able to put that onto the car and go out there, and they've done a fantastic job so far. They've been out there. Jamie Campbell-Walter has been constant throughout. He's lapping very, very quickly. So he just needs to keep on going at that rate and reel the laps off another sort of 28 minutes before the end of the race. And you can see the inset there of one of the engineers belonging to the Lister team. Although they do look very worried on there. I'm sure they're not that worried, but they're smiling behind that they're doing so well, having done 90 laps and having a 1 minute 6 second lead over the 2nd place man, and having already lapped the 3rd place man. Lister pairing are very, very happy indeed. Now having Julian Bailey back into the car, he's going very quickly as well. On his last lap he was something like a full second faster than the leader Jamie Campbell-Walter, so he'll be trying to make up places, and I'm pretty sure he'll be trying very hard to get up to 4th. The next place up is Naspetti with a Ferrari, the Raffinelli Ferrari, is some a few seconds ahead. So
yeah, he's 45 seconds ahead of Julian, and we're on board with him now, but I would think that in the next 25 minutes those 45 seconds will disappear fairly quickly. Naspetti's last lap 1:41.7, Julian's 1:39.5, so he's 2 seconds a lap quicker. That gives him time to catch and pass the Ferrari. And if the others strike problems, maybe tyre problems or fuel problems, then there's just the possibility that Bailey might put the car back on the podium as well from his current 5th place. The Michael and Jeroen Bleekemolen Car Sport Holland car is in 6th position at the moment, so they're still going. And the second Raffinelli Ferrari is in 7th place, but let's go back down to the pits.
Unfortunately, you've had to retire from the race. Can you explain what happened, please?
We had no fuel pressure anymore, so then the race was over for us, but it was going pretty good. We could have been on a podium, but yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Jerome.
Well, fuel pressure problems were the reason that the car came in after 40 minutes very early in the race, and they managed to do an entire normal full stint for their second stint. I thought, well, maybe that was just something at the start of the race, but obviously the fuel pump has decided to pack up entirely, and in he's come. David shaking his head there as the onboard. What was Emanuele not doing to your liking there?
It wasn't what he was not doing, it was a case of the actual noise the car was making. It didn't seem as sweet and as normal as a Ferrari does when it's going around a race circuit. And these little things, when you're sitting inside a racing car at this stage, you know, when you're most of the way through a race, you're listening for every little thing that can possibly go wrong. And if ever you hear something you haven't heard before, you start to worry like there's no tomorrow, thinking that maybe it's about to break down or there's a problem. And just listening to that on the headphones as we were in-car camera with it, I just didn't feel it was as sweet and as nice as it should be.
Well, that's one of the things that I was talking to Jamie about, the Lister. You know, what has happened to the car? It's been developed over the winter again, and he's saying most of the development work actually went into stopping the drivers complaining to Lawrence about how uncomfortable it was to drive. Things like the offset pedals that are a legacy of its road car roots being moved to a more central position, and the steering being moved in line so that you can actually sit with your legs underneath and your knees underneath the steering column. And things like taking away the leather trim padding on the transmission tunnel to allow a wider seat so it's not crushing your hips all the time. And one of the other things he said is the gearbox is much, much smoother. They've worked really hard on the gearbox over the winter, and it's a much smoother change. You don't have to really haul it in and out of gear with the sequential lever, but in fact it just goes in nicely. Well, on board, very different style of sequential gearbox, David, on the 62 Ferrari, because of course that's got the little flipper finger paddles that we all use in our racing simulator games.
Yes, it has, and it looks as though it makes life very easy for them, and it's the same in Formula One. They've now got these paddle shifts on their road cars, which is why we see them racing here in the GT Racing Series. And it's ever so easy. One side is for changing down, the other side is for changing up. And they're very, very quick gear changes indeed. It just saves you a lot of time. It saves you fuel, and all helps towards getting that car to the finish very, very quickly. It's obviously working extremely well here because they're managing to lead the NGT class. And it does look good when you're sitting inside the car.
And Riccatelli in second place in NGT is actually about a minute behind. He is in 10th place overall. Luca Capillari is in 9th place in his Racing Box Viper, and Capillari is also behind the Ferrari. Capillari is 53 seconds behind the Ferrari, and Riccatelli a further 17 behind the Racing Box Viper. So as Riccatelli goes past the Harbour Porsche once more, Laurent Cazenave and Sylvain Noël are down in 17th place, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8th in the NGT class. They've just been passed by the second NGT car. And still Riccatelli with some work to do if he's to hold on. This could perhaps be shaping up as the first Ferrari win of the year. And they came very close indeed out of the final corner at Brno. Lost the race by, well, a car length, no more than that. Riccatelli assaulting the curbs with the Porsche. Certainly not sparing the horses. Now further back, Justin Wilson. Wilson in the 65 car. This is third place in the NGT category, and he is 1.9 seconds behind Riccatelli. So as you can see, that was actually a very close battle between him and Riccatelli. This is the 21 car, the GLPK Viper, and this is Luca Wim Deems and Tamas Ilias. And they are in 13th place overall, 5 laps behind the leaders. So Terrian leading in the Ferrari, Campbell Walter leading in the Lister, and the other Ferraris, well, Emmanuel Naspetti fourth, Julian Bailey now 40 seconds behind him. As we pick up Bailey again in fifth place, still chasing hard. This is the only Belmondo car, makes it very easy to recognise now. There's only one of them left on the track. That's the number 12 car, Vincent Vos. He's in third place. And Luca Riccitelli adjusting his mirror. Again, we ride on board with him. Now, what's he seeing in his mirrors? Well, it's Justin Wilson disappearing a little further behind. Wilson in his first ever race in anything that's not a single-seater, and I think he's not doing too badly from that.
He's doing very well indeed. He's come to this having not been in what we call a tin-top car before, a car with a roof on it. He's normally used to single-seater Formula racing, and he was looking very much forward to the weekend. He had a big smile on his face when we spoke to him on Saturday, and he was looking forward to go out there and having a wonderful time, and it certainly looks as though he's doing that out there at the moment. He is going very quickly, but sitting inside this car at the moment, the Riccitelli car, we've just seen a quick shot a few seconds ago of the rear of the car, and the rear of the car's got a great lump missing out of it. It looks like the rear bumper's missing, and he's been off somewhere. The side of the car's extremely dirty, and there's a lump missing out of it. So at some point during this race, he's managed to either run into somebody or someone's run into him, or he's simply been off across the grass and hit something. I'm not sure what.
Well, that quite possibly explains his drop from first to second in the class. Riccitelli sharing with Dieter Quester. Now, the overall classification, of course, Campbell Walter from Bouchou by 1:05, so still holding on to that advantage, and Vos a lap back in third place. Well, that was a narrow moment for Jamie Campbell Walter, just getting the pass done there, and David was the, I didn't quite see whether the tyre smoke was actually from the Lister or from the Porsche behind him, trying desperately not to hit him up the backside.
I wasn't sure either, but it could have been either of them. They were so close together as they're coming in there to the last chicane just before the start and finish. But you can see that these people all the way through this race, we've got 19 minutes remaining, and they're pushing just as hard now as they were when they started, probably harder now in actual fact than when they started the race. At the beginning of the race, the last thing you want to do is make a mistake early on and ruin a whole weekend's work, whereas you know, if you've been this far through the race and you're just trying to get that extra position, you'll be pushing very hard. Why Jamie has to push this hard when he's got a lead of something like 1 minute and 5 seconds over the second place man with 19 minutes left, I'm not quite sure, but racing drivers are a breed on their own, and they don't like going slowly, and they don't like giving up, and they tend to push all the way to the finish.
It's that old concentration thing again, isn't it, that you keep up the pace that you're comfortable with and that car seems comfortable with to keep going. Now, this is the chance for Julian Bailey. Vincent Vos in the pits for a final pit stop for the Belmondo cars with some 18 minutes to go. Their fuel consumption really sucked. He rejoins, but Bailey may benefit from that in the... Back live at Magny-Cours, the third race of the FIA GT Championship. Jamie Campbell Walter is leading comfortably in the number 1 Lister Storm. In second place, Christophe Bouchou's Labre Competition Viper, 1 minute and 4 seconds behind. The gap wavering a little bit. Jamie is resolutely knocking in the 1 minute 40.2s, 1 minute 40.3s. Bouchou's last lap, 1 minute 39.9, so he's brought back a few tenths here and a few tenths there. Julian Bailey in the second Lister Storm, still in 5th place, and he's hovering around 2 tenths, maybe 3 cents of a second quicker than Jamie Campbell Walter at the moment as he charges after Emanuele Naspetti. Naspetti responding to that threat, and the gap has stabilised now at just under 40 seconds with still only 16 minutes of the race remaining. Oh, somebody's backed their Art Porsche out of the final chicane right under our window. No damage done though. That was Fabio Babini, and the camera's concentrating on the race leader. Well, the Lister team looking a little bit more relaxed now, I have to say. I don't suppose Julian Bailey's feeling hugely relaxed, but Jamie Campbell Walter with this race very nicely under control. And, well, he's just doing his level best to keep the car in a similar sort of vein and nicely under control.
That's one of the things that happens at this point in the race when you've got this good lead and you're sort of cruising towards the finish. You really do have to keep concentrating, because so many people have lost control of the car and lost the race because towards the end of the race they decided to relax and take it easy and maybe knock 2 or 3 seconds longer off, you know, on their lap, so they just take it that bit easier. But that's when things go wrong, and that's when you make mistakes, and that's when all of a sudden when a car gets away from you because you're not concentrating, you're not trying to push hard and make it do what it normally does. But I'm pretty sure Jamie will be out there. He's done a number of these races now. He's the current champion along with Julian from last year. So it's not as though he doesn't have the experience to do it. He'll be pushing all the time. And there we see on the screen the difference now down to 1 minute 3.55. There's not a lot in it, and it's only fractions of a second rather than taking great lumps out of him. So he's obviously decided to settle on something around about the 1 minute 40 mark as a lap, as opposed to pushing hard and doing the 1:38 that they were doing slightly earlier in the race.
Now you just saw there the Lister in front of the Chirot car, and that is the number 2 Lister of Julian Bailey. The Labour Competition Viper is in second place, Bailey in 5th position, and he is 2 laps down on the race leader. In fact, everybody except this car has been lapped by Jamie Campbell-Walter and Tom Coronel's car. Again, the Labour Competition team. This is an absolutely standard, well, as much as they are, racing Viper, bought as it stood, a brand new GTSR, and the team so far have done very little development work on it. They are just learning it and racing it, and you have to say so far they're doing a very good job at both. But in comparison with, say, the Belmondo trio of cars or the Carsport Holland cars, which are very much more highly modified, this is pretty much as bog stock a racing car as you can buy. So as we now are on board with whom? The number 5 Ferrari. Okay, that was Justin Wilson ahead of us, and you saw the Perspective Racing Porsche dive past there as he got held up. The orange and black Perspective car. Now Naspetti goes past Justin Wilson, shakes his fist at him. Well, I'm sorry, he's a single-seater driver, come on. They never use their mirrors. You have to learn these things gradually. I don't think that was Wilson's fault entirely. He just caught him at an inconvenient place, and the Perspective car nearly puts itself in the gravel anyway, so I don't think it'll be too much of a problem for Naspetti to stay or to work his way past him. Of course, Naspetti's major worry is none of these cars at all. It's Julian Bailey, still the better part of 2/3 of a lap behind him, but keeping up the pressure relentlessly, and Naspetti will know that Bailey in a Lister Storm is not to be trifled with. If he gets close enough, then for Emanuele to see him big in the mirrors, then he really knows he is going to be in trouble. So that's why he's so anxious, David, to punt his way through the traffic as quickly as he can, I think.
Yes, he is, and coming up against some of the sort of slower, less experienced NGT cars, he's trying very hard to get past him as quickly as possible, and if he doesn't get his way, he tends to throw his weight around, as you see him waving his fist there as he was got past one of the slower cars. But he's someone who will force his way past one way or the other usually. At this point of the race, certainly he won't want to take risks in damaging it. Having now got a fairly good 4th place, knowing that Bailey's behind and catching, but not catching at the rate that he was expecting, then he'll want to sit there and push for these last few minutes to make sure he gets that 4th place. That'd be a really good result for this Raffinelli Ferrari.
You're right, it does sound dreadful on the down chase, doesn't it? Of course, there's the electronics trying to keep the V12 alive as he just pushes the gear lever forward on this sequential change, but a very fine engine notice as it accelerates up through the gearbox. Through the Nürburgring chicane, another NGT car in his sights, and there is the sister car, that's Marc Duez, and the number 6 machine, as you see, without the right side window. That popped out, and that must have given him a mother and father of all shocks as the cabin suddenly depressurized with a boom.
Yeah, these things, when you're going very fast as these cars are, and all of a sudden the window pops out. I've had this happen to me before, and there is an awful big bang as it sort of disappears, and it looks as though it's pulled half the door with it in that particular car as well when you've seen a side shot of it. And then all of a sudden the depressurization of the cab inside, and you've got dust flying around everywhere. It does give you a bit of a shock for a second, and the heartbeat rises quite considerably, but it looks as though that was a few laps ago now, and is settled into something maybe not quite as aerodynamically perfect as it was before, but certainly doing a good job out there.
Paul Belmondo, you saw on the pit wall watching progress, not only the driver of course, but he's the man behind this team. He organises the whole deal, does the deals and everything, and always a very nicely presented set of cars with the full sponsor backup and everything. A very professional job. There's Tom Coronel. Last year, well, at this stage in the race, he was out there on the track in the Car Sport Holland car, giving it everything. They had awful fuel economy. They knew they had very little chance of catching the Vipers, of the Listers rather, but that didn't stop him really hurling the Viper at the Magny-Cours track in the most impressive manner possible. Now, well, a big coup for Lawrence Pierce to get him into the Lister Storm, and with Jamie Campbell-Walter, a very equal balanced pair of teammates, I think. Nothing really to choose between them in outright speed or in race lap times. And Jamie, who showed up very strongly against Julian Bailey last year, again showing very strongly against Tom Coronel, who's widely regarded as a pretty quick guy. And again, I think that speaks volumes for Jamie Campbell-Walter's ability. The two of them very evenly matched in temperament as well, very laid back and relaxed, and Jamie finding himself, let's say, having an awful lot more opportunity to do laps in practice and in testing this year than may have been the case last year, because Tom's pretty content that they like the similar sort of car, and if Jamie wants to do some laps, then he's not going to argue with him. Eurosport back live at Magny-Cours in the closing stages of the third round of the FIA GT Championship. Just 8 minutes and 40 seconds on the clock. And there is the second place car in the NGT category. Luca Riccitelli still 1 minute and 50 seconds behind the Ferrari that leads the class. And now closing in on his teammate, it looks like, the 76 car, the other Red Bull car, driven by Fabio Mancini, Gianni Collini and Giovanni Ginelli. Well, the 77 car has been impressively fast all weekend, but not able to stay with the Ferrari on race pace. And David, the Ferrari didn't really show all of its cards, I don't think, in the damp. It's a much better car suited to these dry conditions than it was to the rain of yesterday.
It certainly seems that way. It certainly wasn't right at the top of the sheets at all any time over the weekend when it's been raining. And yet all of a sudden here we see the same as Bruno, the last race meeting. It was right up there. In fact, this time they've managed to make really good use of it, and they've got that nice healthy lead at the moment out there, and I'm sure they're going to be a very, very happy team come the end of this race.
Interesting little shot just before the pop-up box of the Ferrari appeared. Did you see the way Riccitelli looked over long and hard to his left, having spent a lap trying to pass his teammate as he chased for the lead of the class? I don't think he was very impressed with that at all. If looks could kill, we would be mourning the passing of the driver of that 76 car. So he continues, but the Ferrari, as you saw from the inset there, half a lap ahead of him. In fact, the better part of 3/4 of a lap ahead of him. And unless there's a sudden and unexpectedly late stop for Terian in the Ferrari, then I think that the car he shared with Christian Pescatori will be running out as NGT winners. Of course, that's a kiss of death now. We're going to see them spinning off out the back window, but we will hopefully avoid that. Riccitelli second. In third place in the class, Justin Wilson with the Coca-Cola Porsche he shares with Thomas Enger. Fourth place in that car, Wolfgang Kaufmann's Freisinger Motorsport Porsche. Fifth place, Patrice Gousselard in the number 50 Labre car that we saw being, not being spun at the start. He's sharing with Jean-Luc Chéreau and Sébastien Dumez. They were second in class with Dumez at the wheel at the start. And in sixth place in that car is the 76 Red Bull car, driven by Giovanni Ginelli. Well, Jamie Campbell-Walter, 103 laps in the books now and 6 minutes to go. David, your mental arithmetic gave us 108 laps as a rough average for the 3 hours, so you're not going to be too far away there at all.
They've done very well. They've had a really good race today. There's been no accidents where they've had to bring a safety car out. There's been very little in the way of yellow flags, and they've had very good pit stops. It's been dry all day. So this is the type of racing that these guys have come here for. They really want to go out there and give it their all, and they've been able to do that in this particular event. And they've got through this event pretty quickly, in the fact that they've got through so many laps without having any problems.
Well, the Listers still the only two cars knocking in the 1 minute 40 laps. Jamie Campbell-Walter's last lap, 1:40.5. Julian's 1:40.1. And just a couple of other cars doing even into 1:41s. Christophe Bouchou in second place and Emanuele Naspetti in fourth place. And that's understandable. Naspetti's under threat from the chasing Bailey. And Bouchou has not yet given up hope of catching Campbell-Walter if something goes wrong with the Lister, perhaps in traffic or whatever. But he's 1 minute and 7 seconds behind. And so Christophe Bouchou in the real world is not going to make that sort of deficit up by sheer driving talent alone. But as with everything else, it's not over until the checkered flag has waved and all the cars have crossed the line. Vincent Voss in third place in the Belmondo car. Fourth is Emanuele Naspetti, but a further lap behind. So Voss, the final podium finisher, on his own now with just under 5 minutes left to go, and he'll have to stop within the next 2 minutes to lose that position, because Naspetti will have to make up a lap on him and then pass him for a second time to get actually past him in the standings. Julian Bailey fifth. And which of the Bleekemolen's will be at the wheel of the number 4 car now? Michael to Sebastian, probably back to Michael Bleekemolen. None of them on the pit wall outside of our window, so a little bit hard to tell that. But whatever, the Carsport Holland car in 6th place. Mark Duers in the Ferrari in 7th place, having started from 20-umpteenth on the grid after dreadful, dreadful problems in practice in the car that he shares with Gunther Bleelinger. And here is Naspetti again, pushing on hard. 1:42.2 is the most that the Raffinelli car can manage at the moment. That's not its quickest race lap by some stretch, but at this stage, and it may be that they've gone through on the same set of tyres, he may well be finding that the car's got not an awful lot left to give. He seems to have got Julian Bailey fairly much bottled up. Julian's gap is now down from 40 seconds to 30, but there are only 3 minutes remaining. So Naspetti perhaps not giving it the full 110% now.
You wouldn't think that when you're looking at these pictures and seeing just how fast these cars are going around this wonderful circuit here. They're cutting the corners, they're trying hard. You can see how he runs over the curb there. That's not driving round as though you're on a Sunday afternoon drive. That's driving, giving it your absolute best to try and make sure you can get the best lap times out of it. So all the way to the finish, all the way to the 3 hours that this race is going to take. These guys are pushing very, very hard. Maybe on a very last lap, when they look at their fuel gauge, and the fuel gauge says you've got approximately half a mile left of fuel, and you know you've got a mile left to go, then maybe they might back off a little bit, but certainly until that very last lap, no one will give up at all.
Well, I had hoped to be able to answer some of your email queries during the course of the race, but unfortunately here in the home of the French Grand Prix, I'm having dreadful communication problems trying to get loaded up from the internet, so we will answer those, or I will answer those during the week. We will try and bring some of your questions out when we get to Silverstone in a fortnight's time. David Terrian then, just perhaps 2 laps from NGT victory, and that will be a fine 8th place overall, which reflects A, the speed of the NGT cars even in the dry, and B, a fairly reasonable toll rate among the GT cars. We have seen perhaps a larger number of retirements from the GT class than we're used to seeing, but Terrian still very comfortably ahead of Luca Riccitelli. Naspetti inside and safely past the Perspective Racing Porsche, and then heading back down towards the conclusion of the lap. 1 minute and 47 seconds to go, so he'll have about a minute or so to go when he gets oh no, in fact this is the Nürburgring chicane, so Naspetti probably will do 1 more lap, and Jamie Campbell-Walter, well, he will probably have to do another one as well. He's done 105 laps now. Comes to the final corner, accelerates across the line. The V12 engine in the Lister still sounding as sharp and crisp as ever, and it has certainly, as far as we can tell with the eye in the ear, never faltered throughout the race. Incidentally, we did have a question earlier about the colour scheme on the Lister in previous race. I did say I'd look into it, and yes, to pick up the point, this colour scheme on the top of the Lister, the multicolours there, which looks very much like a stress diagram that a computer would draw, that's exactly what it is, or a replica of one, because one of the Lister team's sponsors does build stress determining equipment, so that's exactly why it's got that multicoloured pattern on it, and Ingenuity, the company responsible for doing that. Well, whatever stress they felt early on, and there may have been a few raised heartbeats and perhaps a couple of shouted words in the Lister pit wall, certainly watching the pictures of Julian and Jamie knocking wheels as they swap positions in the early stages of the race. I don't think that there has been an awful lot of pressure on these 2 cars. I'm sure that we will find after the race they felt early on, David, that they actually had pretty much the makings of a good, secure race as long as it didn't rain.
yes, they were very much hoping for no rain at all. They've got what they hoped for, and in doing so, they're on their way to winning this race. Just a few corners left now. You can see them coming down that straight into a chicane. They'll come, and then round a very tight right-hander. That's them coming down now, turning into the last chicane as they come round down into a very tight right-hander.
And the camera director's found him finally. Jamie Campbell-Walter, for the first time, pushes the tail out, slews the car across the line. The NGT winning Ferrari right behind him. You saw the Ferrari team celebrating. The Lister team just as delighted as Jamie comes to a halt in front of them, and then wheel spins away in a welter of V12 howl and tyre smoke. So Lister and Ferrari, the winners here at Magny-Cours, and the JMB team are absolutely delighted with that, aren't they? And I'm sure Lister will be just as delighted. One of each of their cars on the top step of the podium, and a double winning weekend-ish kind of early beginning of the next week thing for Lister, because the British GT Championship race at Donington Park was won on the final lap by the Lister Storm. Mike Jordan just managing to take the lead from Tim Harvey's Viper on the final lap of the race at Donington Park. So victory in Britain, victory in Europe, and Julian Bailey coming home in 5th place in the second Lister. All right, not a 1-2 result, but I'm sure Lawrence Pierce will be very happy with that. And for the JMB team, their 62 car now resplendent once more in the red, white and green of the tricolore, the colours of Italy, instead of the black and white that we've seen them in their slightly hastily prepared form this year. A victory and 9th place overall for Christian Pescatori and David Terrien, the pair who shared that 62 car. Second place across the line, Luca Riccitelli, 14.8 seconds behind. So Terrien must have almost come round the final lap in first gear. He was so much slower. 1 minute 50.4 his last lap, 1:43.9 Riccitelli's, taking 7 seconds of his, at one stage, nearly 1 minute margin back on that final lap alone. Clearly, the Ferrari was cruising, whereas, as we saw, Riccitelli had the afterburners fully lit all the way round. Julian Bailey in the number 2 car in 5th position, just behind Emanuele Naspetti. But those are our podium finishers. The Lister victorious. Bouchou and Belloc not winners this time out, but still another strong finish for the Labre competition car, and the only Belmondo car in the race makes it onto the podium as the other two retire. Naspetti 4th for the Ferrari. 5th place, Julian Bailey and Nicholas Springer's Lister Storm ahead of the remaining Car Sport Holland Viper. And the second Ferrari not in the points, or not in the top half dozen this time, unfortunately. 7th place for Gunther Bleilinger and Mark Duez's car, which has been struggling throughout practice and really only came healthy for the race. Capellari and Mattiuzzi's Viper in 8th place, ahead of our NGT winners, the Ferrari 360 Modena. So Luca Riccitelli and Dieter Quester then 10th overall, 2nd in class. Thomas Enger and Justin Wilson, well, I have to say, if it stayed wet, I fancy them for victory, but still on the podium in NGT in Wilson's first ever touring car race, or roof race. Jamie Campbell-Walter kisses the Lister with delight. And a big hug from Tom Coronel, already with his winner's cap on. Great stuff from the Lister pair. A very, very fast, very, very confident, very, very relaxed duo. And let's see if we can get a quick chat with Jamie, find out how it went.
Yes, I'm ready, Noel.
Well, we can hear our microphone is down there.
Jamie, many congratulations. A very dominant victory. Did the dry weather conditions help you much, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, our car's very good in the dry normally. And we have a good base setup, which we work from. Obviously, we've had no dry running. And, you know, it was really good. Obviously, the start was tricky because we were 5th from the Super Pole. and we managed to get up to P1 by the time the pit stops came, and then Tommy did a great job, and from then on really we had a great car today. I think everyone else was struggling with tyre wear, and we went for some harder tyres than everyone else, and ours lasted and theirs didn't, so that's why we were able to be very consistent. But the cars just behaved beautifully today, and the team's done a fantastic job, and we're back on track basically.
Thank you, Jamie.
Well, back on track, yes. Lister have had a few gremlins at the beginning of the season, but everything went exactly according to plan. They used their well-thumbed setup book that Lawrence Pierce has got of every setup, of every lap, of every car that Lister have ever run, and went back to what they knew. And in the end, the weather was good to them, and their tyre choice was the right one. They were always going to try and make their tyres last the whole race. And, well, when he brought both cars in together, we thought maybe Lawrence might be taking on a little much for such a small team in the pits, but they got them through and out with no problems. And for another small team, the JMB team, victory is a great afternoon for David Terrian.
That's a great win. How do you feel?
It was just okay. I just had to drive. Christian did a very fantastic job at the beginning of the race. I just had to drive the car to the end. It was very difficult because the team told me to drive slow, and always slower. So I had to be careful with the fuel. So it was hard to drive slow because I wanted to push, but the team told me, oh, keep. So it was okay.
And how does it feel to have won at home?
It's very good because it's a win at home in front of all my fans, and it's also a win, first win for Ferrari, so that's great.
Thank you, David.
So double success for David Terrian and Christian Pescatori. Ciao Mama, he says. Well, a great job. I'm sure Mama's on the phone somewhere doing a very good job. Oh, nice flat hat, Christian. I wouldn't show that too much to the cameras if I were you. So another strong job, and as we suspected, with his time dropping away in the final laps, fuel very much a worry for the Ferrari. So Magny-Cours producing, well, an exciting beginning to the end, and for some of the drivers, a very exciting close to the race as well. And David, the weather, I think, in the end, was probably what swung the balance in Lister's favour, and that, in the end, was what they were praying for all the way through.
That's right, it certainly did help them. Last time out at Brno, when it was raining in the middle of the race, they did suffer a little bit and didn't do as well there as they had hoped. But once we got rid of that wet weather here, and it turned out really nice today, they were able to use that to the best effect, and there we see them right at the top. We can see the points now. He's up there with Jamie up at the top on his own, leading the championship, so he'll be very, very pleased with that. And his aim now for the rest of the season is to make sure he stays up there, not to have any more problems, and preferably not to have any more wet races where it slows them down a little bit and allows the others to rather take control of the races.
I'll be looking with trepidation to Silverstone then, although I have to say the weather in Britain is considerably better than the weather in France over the last few days. But Silverstone, the next race, of course, for Lister, it's their home track then, a track that they know perhaps as well as anybody else in the field, and somewhere certainly where Julian and Jamie will be hoping that the number 1 and 2 cars will run very strongly indeed. And once more, of course, at the Grand Prix circuit at Silverstone, they will be hoping for dry and clement conditions. But, of course, the drier it is in practice, the better chance everybody else has of sorting out how to catch them up. The Car Sport Holland cars still teething problems with these highly developed machines. The Belmondo cars, 2 of 3 of them didn't even make it to 2/3 distance. Only the Labra competition car, still this new machine, is doing strong service, and its drivers joint second in the championship, just 1 point behind Jamie Campbell-Walter. Well, we'll continue with our action from Magny-Cours. Stay with us after the break. We'll be back with the highlights of the first of a pair of Super Touring races here. Treacherous conditions in qualify for the Super Tourers. See how they were for the early race. And then we'll pick up the action live with the second Super Touring race. And to round out our afternoon's viewing this afternoon, we will have the second of the Super Production races. But from the FIA GTs, Jamie Campbell-Walter, with a comfortable victory in the end, leaves with a single-point championship advantage for the Lister team. Right behind him, though, Christophe Bouchou and Jean-Philippe Belloc, the Labre competition pair. We move on to Silverstone in 2 weeks' time. Will the Brits triumph again then, or will the French get revenge? We'll have to wait and see. Stay with us after the break for more action.
The FIA GT Championship.